Welcome to the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and I'm so excited that you're here. The Plan B CRNA podcast is the only show made specifically for nurse anesthetists who are exploring options outside of their traditional career paths. This is the place to expand your mind and your goals as we uncover new ways to produce side income together. Journey with me as I go down various rabbit holes to explore the best Plan B options for you. This episode is brought to you by On-Call Capital. On-Call Capital is dedicated to educating CRNAs and other healthcare providers about investing outside of the traditional stock market. On-Call Capital also provides opportunities for you, yes you, to create passive income and generational wealth while also lowering your taxable income through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure you do that right now so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for joining me today, and now, on with the show. Welcome to the Rabbit Hole on the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and throughout my journey in finding a Plan B, I've gone down numerous rabbit holes to figure out which ones work for me. And since I've done some of this research already, I only think it's right to bring that information to fellow healthcare professionals to help aid in your search. As always, it's important for you, the listener, to do your own research and form your own opinions. Everyone's situation is unique, and a Plan B that works for one CRNA doesn't always work for another. Self-awareness is the key in any decision you make, since you must have an accurate grasp of your own strengths, weaknesses, and goals. Today's topic is inspired by some of my recent dives into e-commerce and dropshipping. So, without further ado, our rabbit hole of the day is dun dun dun, retail arbitrage. Now, we just got done with the holidays, which normally involves a lot of online purchases and gift giving, but we don't always get what we want. And it's common to see an uptick in customer returns shortly after the holiday season. Not to mention, if you've ever shopped on Amazon yourself, then you've probably purchased something that ultimately didn't work out. Instead of holding on to the item or reselling it yourself, you decide to send it back for a refund. Amazon has a very lenient return policy of no questions asked refunds up to 90 days after purchase. I mean, I know that my wife once purchased 2 dresses of different sizes with the sole intent of sending back the one that didn't fit. In fact, around 50% of customers in the US will send something back to their online retailer in the next 12 months, with many sending several returns. But what happens to that item that you send back? I mean, if you've already unboxed it, they can't just sell it as brand new again, right? Well, that depends on the item in question, of course. From the perspective of an individual online seller, sometimes it doesn't make sense to pay Amazon to send your returns back. So Amazon ends up carrying a large amount of returned merchandise that it just needs to get rid of. And Amazon isn't the only one out there. Think about Walmart, Target, Home Depot, or any other large retailer. They all get returns that end up in the clearance section, or in many cases, on a pallet in a warehouse. And that's what return pallets are. Containers are products that have been returned to the retailer that are sold sight unseen at low prices to anyone willing to take the risk. Sellers buy these return pallets at clearance prices, refurbish them, and then resell them for profit. That's called retail arbitrage. And while I mentioned that this happens with many different retailers, I'm going to focus today primarily on Amazon, basically because the research for that is much more available. I'd like to start off with some quick math. Amazon considers a 10% return rate to be normal for most merchandise. Studies show that number may be rising after the pandemic, and of course, this varies across different product categories. I mean, the return rates for books and media are around 5 to 7%. General merchandise in the home, kitchen, and sporting goods are 8 to 10%. Consumer electronics are 25 to 35%, and clothing and fine jewelry can be as high as 40%. But let's stick with that 10% return rate for our purposes. Now, Amazon online stores, third-party seller services, and physical stores had a total of over $342 billion in revenue for 2021. Assuming that 10% number, that would put the returns market in the $34 billion range. And as we've discussed in previous rabbit hole episodes, e-commerce is only expected to grow over the next decade, so we can expect the return market to expand as well. The market is plenty big, and it's getting bigger. So are you ready to dive in and see what it takes to get started? Let's do it. Like many other businesses, flipping pallets is not usually an overnight success. There are many YouTube and TikTok videos out there that will tell you otherwise, but there are plenty of folks that you'll find who are stuck with unsold overstock because they didn't do their homework. What is a realistic expectation for profit? Well, successful retail arbitrage sellers can make over $100,000 per year with a good ROI of 10 to 30%. And you can boost that ROI even more if you're meticulous about refurbishing your pallet items. More on that later. The main problem is that you are limited by the amount of time that you have to physically shop for products to sell. However, if you can scale and outsource product acquisition, you can make upwards of 7 figures. An example of this is a guy by the name of Ryan Grant, who employs a team of shoppers who scour the clearance sections of department stores. Let's go over some basics then. The cost of a return pallet can be anywhere between $100 to $20,000, depending on the size and the contents inside. A return pallet with computers and electronics would cost more than a pallet of clothes, generally speaking. You also have to pay the cost of shipping the return pallet to your home or warehouse, which could exceed the value of what you paid for the pallet altogether. You should expect to spend $300 to $500 per pallet. And if you want to avoid this fee, you can always look for Amazon liquidations in your geographic area. I mean, just a quick search for Amazon liquidations in North Carolina showed that I have several places to choose from within a 2-hour radius. And you may have picked up on another key component of this business: storage. You have to have space to put this stuff. My cousin works in junk hauling, and he is running across stuff every day that he could resell if only he had the time and the space. You'll have to figure out where you want to keep items until they're sold, whether that's your garage, a storage unit, or a warehouse. You'll likely want to set up your own Amazon or eBay store to sell the items that you purchase, along with getting an EIN and reseller sales and tax certificate. I went over this process in my e-commerce rabbit hole, episode 139, and the drop shipping rabbit hole, episode 188. So I'm not going to go over that whole thing again here, but I do want to get into some of the nuances of this particular approach to e-commerce, including some strategies to boost profits. Now, first, these pallets are always listed with a manufacturer suggested retail price, or MSRP. The MSRP is determined by counting up the full selling price of all of the items in a particular pallet. But you should keep in mind that the goods inside can be in any condition. Parts may be missing or broken, and it's up to you to figure it out. You may come across several empty boxes in your pallet as well. There are some fun unboxing videos out there on YouTube if you want to get a better idea of what to expect. But it's kind of like those Christmas videos where the kids are opening up the gifts and they have no idea what they're going to get. You see the same thing with the Amazon pallets. And this is the point where I have to say that pallet purchasing can be risky. Yes, buying a pallet from an authorized Amazon return pallet distributor, such as Amazon Liquidation Auctions or Bulk, BULQ, is usually a safe bet in the sense that you're getting actual returns that have come into Amazon. But the quality and condition of those products will vary from one pallet to another. It's always a crapshoot, but that can be part of the fun. It's kind of like treasure hunting. So how do you protect yourself? By making sure that you bid less than 20% of that MSRP. That means that if your MSRP is $6,000, you may start your bid at $600 and only go up to a maximum of about $1,200 or, so long as you're not paying for shipping, and even less if you are. By doing this, you have a good chance of making a profit, depending on how much time you spend refurbishing those products. Now, there are many places to purchase Amazon pallets, and I want to take a minute to go over a few of them. First, as I mentioned before, you can look in your local area for liquidation centers. After that, you have to go online where there are plenty of choices. Let's hit the big ones. Number one, Amazon Liquidation Auctions. It's the product of a partnership between Amazon and Bstock back in 2018. It's the official B2B marketplace to buy overstock merchandise directly from Amazon. In order to bid on an auction, you have to register first with Bstock and then be approved to bid. There's no fee involved here, but you must have a valid reseller certificate to be eligible. And if you bid and win an auction, you'll be required to submit additional business info and, of course, the payment. Number two, next is Bulk with a Q, one of the largest sellers of liquidation merchandise on the internet. They work with many retailers, not just Amazon. The best thing about this site is that there are no auctions. You just click on what you want, add it to the cart, and check out. You also get more visibility of what's inside the pallet compared to some of the other liquidation sites out there. They give you a list of exactly what's supposed to be inside. And of course, you still run into broken or incomplete items, but you get the idea. It's pretty useful. Number 3, liquidation.com. It's the largest liquidation company online, and they also work with different retailers in addition to Amazon. But unlike bulk, they sell by auction, and they give you very little information about what's actually inside your pallet. Number 4, let's go with directliquidation.com, which works with Amazon, but also does a lot of work with Walmart and Target. All of their sales are based on auctions, but the nice thing is that you can search by brand or store. That means if you want to buy solely Target return pallets, you can search for it. Unfortunately for you, they tend to have even less detailed descriptions than liquidation.com. And the photos used don't always reflect the actual image of the products being sold. So watch out for yourself there. And there are other sites out there. bstocksupply.com, 888lots.com, Blue Lots, boxfox.co. These all have pallets for sale. And I mean, you can even go on to Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace to find them. But the number of those offerings will largely depend on where you're located. Now, each of these sites have certain nuances that you will have to become accustomed to over time. But how do you ensure that you're taking every possible step to mitigate your risk? Well, here are some things to consider. Look at it. Did you look at it? Don't blindly go by the MSRP that's listed. If the pallet is going to cost you $500, but you see a bunch of cheap coffee makers covering half of it, then maybe that's not the deal for you. Market research. Before purchasing a pallet, request an itemized list of the pallet in question. If that's not available, write down the products you can see and do some research on your own. You'll get better at this over time, particularly since someone else may snatch up the pallet you're researching if you take too long. Stick with the familiar. Yes, you can learn anything over time, but it may be easier to go with items that you're personally more comfortable with at first. The research and selling process will go more smoothly, allowing you to gain more experience in the business instead of being overwhelmed from the get-go. Shipping costs. And I'm not just talking about the cost of the pallet here, but also the shipping fees that you charge customers. This is particularly troublesome with Canadian sellers, where the cost is much higher than in the US. But either way, if your shipping fees are too high, you'll lose potential sales. Seasonality. Well, maybe don't sell lawnmowers in Minnesota in January, eh? Organization. It can be easy to lose track of the items you want to sell if you just stuff them into a storage space. It would be best if you organize that inventory into an easily accessible fashion so that you can quickly get to it at the time of sale. You can also use a simple spreadsheet to manage the inventory. Some of those things to include on that spreadsheet are the name and the brand of the item SKU, item condition. Is it new, like new, used, damaged, missing pieces? Retail price, listing price, quantity of each item, listing description, platforms that the item is listed on, and lastly, profits. Next is platform selection. Don't put all of your eggs into one basket. You'll likely want to diversify the platforms that you choose to list your products on, but make sure that you keep an eye on where similar items are getting the most traction and sales so that you can identify the best place for your listings. Some options include Amazon, obviously, Facebook Marketplace, eBay, Craigslist, and Virage Sale. That's with a V. With all that being said, there is an art and a science to selling online. The key is to boost the value of what you're selling so that you make a profit that is worth all of that trouble. I want to cover 2 strategies real quick that can help you to do this. Number 1, repair and refurbish everything. Fixing an item that you want to resell is normal, but you shouldn't stop there. If you can sell a working and fully packaged product, you'll make significantly more money than selling an unboxed but functional product. While packaging and accessories are commonly damaged or missing, you can buy many of these parts on sites like eBay. For instance, you can find empty iPhone boxes for sale at about $7 to $15 a piece right now, with manuals included. Now, you might think, man, that's a lot of hassle, but consider that boxed iPhones can command an additional 25% or more in premium for that resale value. Having a shrink wrap machine can help you give that finished look as well. And number 2, bundle products together. Selling individual parts or items can be lucrative, but often the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. For instance, maybe you came across a bunch of electronics. You can pair some headsets with a keyboard and a mouse for gamers. Or if you come across a lot of beauty products, you can package several items together as gift baskets and sell at a higher price than you would have for those products individually. Don't be afraid to experiment with that. It's kind of fun. All right, we've reached my favorite part of the show. Let's hit those pros and cons. First is a pro, small startup costs. The average cost to get started is around $14,000, and that's not tiny. You've got software, website costs, office and storage space, inventory costs, advertising and marketing. But of course, you can get by much more cheaply in the beginning. You can simply just go buy a pallet for a few $100 and then you're off to the races. Next is a con, competition. There are a ton of resellers out there, so you'll have to really analyze the market and understand where the demand is for the products that you're buying. Pro, it's a simple business model. You're buying items cheap and selling them for profit. That's pretty easy to understand, right? Con, high risk. I mentioned earlier that every pallet is a surprise. And while that can go both ways, it's really a bummer when you spend hundreds of dollars on a dud. Once you've bought the pallet, there's simply no recourse for you. Pro, high margins. Compared to other businesses, retail arbitrage can give you a significant ROI on your investment. Con, time consuming. It simply takes time to check out pallets, do the research, sort the inventory, post items for sale, and then schedule shipping or personal meets. It can be done on the side, but your sales will likely reflect the time that you put into it. Pro, flexibility. You can buy a pallet of home goods one minute and electronics the next. You can stick to your personal strengths with items you know a lot about, or pivot easily to meet the changing demands of your customers. Our last con is space. Depending on how large you scale, you will probably need more space than your garage can handle. This could be a significant overhead cost over time. And finally, our last pro, multiple marketplaces. As mentioned earlier, you can choose to sell products in any number of online spaces. You can even have a physical store in addition to that if you choose. The options are numerous. Now, as always, I have quite a few links in the show notes to help you out. There are also a couple of books out there to choose from, but I will say many of them had the same complaint in that they are too basic. But two that I thought might be useful for those of you who are just starting out are Liquidation Gold, a guide to buying and selling store returns and overstock items on eBay by Luke Langford. It's a simple book for beginners that only costs $4 on Kindle or $10 paperback. And then How to Open a Successful Wholesale Liquidation Store by Burnett. She has owned and operated a liquidation store in her hometown with $20,000 in startup costs, and now she and her husband are financially independent. Now, this book is a few years old, but it seems to have decent content for, wanting to start your own brick and mortar store. And it's even cheaper than the other book. And with all that said, that's going to do it for our show today. As always, I want to thank you for listening to the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you found value today, make sure you hit subscribe and give us a 5-star review. The show only grows because of you, so make sure you share it with a friend, family member, or colleague to help them on their passive income journey. I also want to hear from you. If you have a question, comment, or rabbit hole topic that you'd like me to cover in an upcoming show, just put it in your review of the podcast. I check those all the time, and I cover those questions in future episodes. If you'd like to know more about me and gain access to passive investment opportunities, like our current offering for multifamily in Houston, make sure you check me out on Facebook, LinkedIn, or visit my website at www.oncallinvestments.com. This is Bobby Jones signing off. Until next time, stay safe and take care of each other out there.
Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you haven't already subscribed and reviewed the show, I'd be honored if you took the extra time. It really helps to expand our reach and get the word out about the show. If you're a CRNA who is interested in sharing your story on our podcast, I'd love to have you. Please email me at bobby@oncallinvestments.com for more information. This episode was brought to you by OnCall Capital. They are dedicated to helping providers like you develop passive income and generational wealth through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. feel free to check out their website at www.oncallinvestments.com and subscribe to their free educational email series. You can find On Call Capital on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out our YouTube page, where you'll find all of the show episodes along with other educational videos. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.